Hey friends, I'm so excited about this podcast today, episode 250. We start off with a massive party and we move on from there to talk about a lot of the things that are going on in our nation today, including President Trump's first 100 days. We're going to talk about the massive perception gulf between mainstream media and the general public. We're going to talk about how important truth is. We're going to talk about Christian nationalism, for lack of a better word. Should Americans be proud about their nation? Why does it matter? And we're going to talk about history. And we have a very important guest coming to Living Stones. We want you to take part in this event at the end of the month. But recapturing the true history of America. How can a nation be strong and how can we move forward in unity if we don't love our country and appreciate the country in which God has placed us? So we're going to talk about all that in this very special 250th episode. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, welcome to the Ron Johnson Discipleship Podcast.
Thank you for joining us on this history-making moment. 250 episodes. Can you believe it?
Quarter of the way there.
And I want to thank, on this joyous occasion, I want to thank our producer, Matthew.
Yes.
Thank you we're sitting here in this beautiful sanctuary, but you have to set up every week because our studio is...
we want to thank you, so here we go.
I was hearing giggles back there.
Thanks, guys.
I was on a big camera.
I knew they had something up their sleeve, but I had no idea.
I was hearing giggles back there. I was like, got kids running back.
Love you guys.
Get back to work.
We couldn't do it without you.
Make sure those bills are paid.
All right. I knew something was coming, but that was over the top. Anyway, awesome. But
Hey,
we were
great
thanking
job.
you,
Thank
Matthew.
No, I appreciate that.
Yes, all the setup, week in, week out. We're going to have a brand new studio here in the near future, and we're excited about that.
What you guys don't realize is since our incident over the youth room, our old studio was... it's police line all over is not able to be used. Matthew has been working hard, setting us up week after week to make sure that we have the best lighting, best sound. So he's been amazing throughout this whole process.
Amen. Well, in addition to this historic moment, and I again thank everybody who's sharing, watches us every week and shares our joy online. We also had another historic moment, slightly less in comparison to this moment, but that was President Trump's first 100 days of office. Yeah. And what's interesting about this is not so much... the accomplishments or non-accomplishments. It's the media divide between how they are interpreting his first 100 days of office and how the general public has interpreted. And as much as they have, I think the polling, or not the polling, but the percentage of negative coverage is at 92%. So imagine you take over the office as president and 92% of all the mainstream media coverage is out to get you. Everything you do is put in a negative light. And again, we could sit here and use this podcast to talk about the accomplishments. And if you're a conservative believer, Bible-believing Christian with a Christian worldview, you cannot be more happy than seeing. We could start talking about that. I was reading the list that goes on and on and on, and again, just great stuff. But the divide between mainstream media and the general public is immense. In fact, I wanted to read here. According to a recent Gallup poll, 36% of Americans have zero trust in the mainstream media. 33% have very little trust. So that makes 69% of Americans have either no trust or little trust in the mainstream media. Which group are you in? Are you in little, no, high? Where are you at? How are you rating the media these days?
Well, I read the media. Well, I'm the zero trust group, but I watch it just to kind of see what angle, what narrative they have. You know how, it's so funny because I've been watching the NBA playoffs, and the commercials, you have WWE on there. You ever? I've never gotten to the World Wrestling, whatever.
Yeah.
My wife was looking at a commercial. She's like, "Why do people watch that?" I said, "It's like soap opera, right? It's drama. It's no offense to those fans who love that, but like it's not like it's scripted, right?
It's like, not really wrestling.
Yeah, it's not like Olympic or like high school wrestling. It's scripted, and I don't know much about that world, but that's
I might add is we talked about this. It's also like a super chick movie where the heroine of the action movie is throwing 300-pound guys left and right across the room. It's the same thing. It's entertainment. It's not reality.
It's entertainment, right? It's a scripted play. That's how I see the mainstream media. Like when you go watch it, you just kind of watch a scripted play. Like, does it correspond to reality? Does it correspond to different values we have? That's negligible. At this point, it is what it is. So I think those percentages are pretty accurate. 36% are kind of like me. 33% are just like, well, every once in a while there's something useful to it. And then there's a very small percentage who actually watches the wrestling matches be like, oh, that's real. That's what they actually do.
So
like there's no script to that at all. So it's like reality. It's like watching soap opera.
Yeah, I think what's been encouraging for me is to realize that the average person out there is not an idiot that doesn't get it and just sits there blindly soaking in all this quote news. We realize at this point, these folks are absolutely out of touch with what's going on. In fact, all of their polls got really messed up when they would go out and interview the person on the street. And I saw where they even had a black interviewer interviewing black people, all right, to try to say, hey, how you feel about this? Are you regretting your vote? Are you regretting President Trump's leadership? And they were all in support of the president because they're not buying it anymore after living through the propaganda for so many years and seeing through the smoke and mirrors and realizing you guys are really not expressing the true state of what Americans feel about what's going on right now.
Well, that's how I feel about most polling, too. When I look at most polling, I'm thinking WWE. I mean, that's a good analogy. I'm going to milk that analogy. Now, are there really good polling? Yes, they're really good polling. Now, how do I determine that? I look at election results. I look at the last presidential election. There are polls, good polls that consistently show that Trump is up. And at the very end, he won. And then you got other polls who consistently show Harris is up. At the very end, when they know that they're kind of close to, they know they're going to meet, Judgment Day is coming on election day, they start narrowing in. So at the very end, they can say, well, we were accurate. But if you look at the body of their work, they're just propaganda for months and months and months. Those same polls, I don't trust them because they're propaganda.
And that is something, again, that's very disheartening when a poll becomes a tool of propaganda. It's an outright lie. Well, it's used to drive the narrative. It's used to shift people's opinions. It's used to shift people's votes.
Well, that is the dangerous part of polls because, if you do an election poll, that can be validated whether you do a good job or a bad job on election day. But if you poll specific issues, for example, on marriage or on life, you make the poll whatever you want. You sample whatever you want. You can, you do whatever you want, and there's no accountability because it's whatever your poll says. That's why it's so dangerous.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And we don't really know what that poll said. It's just we can excuse it. Well, that's it. We interviewed this many people, and that's what they said, supposedly. There's no accountability.
Very few people look into the demographics and look at. I think one of the New York Times poll. Victor Davis said he looked at one of the New York Times polls that says how Trump is super low approval rating. They only interview, only 38% of people they interview voted for Trump. Well, let's look at what happened in the national population, what percentage of people voted for Trump. So they severely decrease his poll shares of people they interview. I mean, again, stuff like that. Like no one really look at those statistics. They just give you the headlines.
Right.
So we're all about the headlines. So again, I look at all these different pollings, mainstream media like WWE.
Well, to add some more evidence here to your WWE illustration.
You like that one?
I like that. I like that a lot. We had here CNN was actually interviewing cartel members to see how they felt about being labeled global terrorists. I mean, imagine going up to a person who has raped, murdered, killed people, been deported. I saw in the interview the guy has glasses on, a hat on. He's got a mask up to here. He looks like a criminal, and we're concerned about their feelings. We're concerned about Trump labeling them terrorists. Well, it sounds like they're bringing a lot of terror to their communities. I mean, it's ridiculous. But this is CNN. It's like we've lost even who the good guys are and who the bad guys are in our culture today. And the fact that they're concerned about the feelings of a gang member who's terrorizing citizens over the labels that they've been attached to them is just mind-boggling.
Well, I think they're embracing who they are. They're embracing that they are propaganda, and they're embracing that they are scripted.
I even saw Stephen, what's his name from ESPN?
Colbert? Oh, Stephen A. Smith.
Stephen A. Smith,
Yeah.
right? And he was saying, what's going on? People go to Washington and their job is simply to oppose everything that Trump stands for. That's not leadership. I mean, even he gets it. Like, there's no credibility in just going there and poo-pooing, everything that the opposition is trying to get done. Anyway, this gulf is widening, and that leads us to a second thing here on this blatant liberal bias and partisanship is Trump's finally acting on it. In March, and we saw the executives from National Public Radio and Public Broadcasting Service testifying before a DOJ subcommittee of the Oversight and Government Accountability Committee, and they were trying to defend their blatant liberal partisanship. And what we found out during that hearing was that they employed 87 Democrats and no Republicans, and that basically they were running ideological programs about abortion, race, American history, and airing a drag queen story hour show that was aimed at toddlers. All of this came out, this incredible bias, and the travesty of all this is that this group is being funded by tax dollars. And so imagine if we started funding, the 700 Club, CBN 700 Club, or funding some other Christian program with tax dollars that are promoting, a clear worldview. These guys are doing it under the guise of being neutral or public or whatever. Here's a great article. It says, for decades, taxpayers' dollars have quietly padded the bank accounts of elite universities, national newsrooms, and bloated bureaucracies under the banner of, quote, public good. But the public's patience is wearing thin, especially when those same institutions turn around and ridicule the very people funding them. And I like this. It says, turns out when it comes to ending handouts for woke institutions, Americans are ready to say, let them eat endowments. Because basically the first university Trump cracked down on was Harvard University. Talk about elite. $2 billion of federal funds Harvard receives, and they're sitting on I don't know how many billion-dollar endowment fund. Why in the world do they need our tax dollars? And if they continue to insult our sensibilities while we support them with their DEI agendas. So anyway, I thought that was very, very interesting, that the exposure, again, of these groups that are faking being neutral, but they're not neutral at all.
What's interesting to me is, back when we were trying to pass the Religious Freedom and Restoration Act in America.
Yeah.
Remember those horrific days in which every elite came out against Indiana. And that was a moment when I realized everybody was against our worldview. Everybody was.
Corporate America joined the enemy, and they had never been on the enemy's side in terms of all of that. But now we had corporate America, we had mainstream media, universities, sports,
everybody came out. NCAA, everyone jumped on the bandwagon. It was eye-opening for me, and the thought I felt at that time was like, wow, like this movement's unstoppable. Like we're cascading straight into a place in which Christianity will be outlawed. That's what I felt like. Well, now, fast forward, 10 years later, whatever it was, I realized the whole game was rigged. The reason the movement moves so quickly is because they're funded by our tax dollars.
Yeah. So when you control the media platform, which they do, they have unfettered control over the messaging, and then they're getting funded by us to attack us and undermine us. Like you said, the whole thing's rigged. I mean, how can you lose when you have money and you have a platform?
It's like, my kids are disruptive and they're acting chaotically, and I realize, it's because I'm paying for their tutor who is actually undermining my authority when I'm not looking by subverting this.
Teaching you that your parents are idiots. Don't listen to them.
I'm the one who's funding the tutor.
Yeah.
We're paying all this money to it, but no one knew. No one knew about any of this. Now looking back, you realize, wait, we're funding this. We're funding all these NGOs that's promoting all these value. We're funding MPA. We're funding. I didn't know we're funding $2 billion to Harvard. Did you know we're giving $2 billion to Harvard every year?
No, I didn't.
No.
That's 2B. That's billion. That's not 2 million. Why is Harvard University selected, to receive that kind of money, and how did that happen?
Like PBS and all these different things. It's just like, wait, this is not this. This is why for a season it seems like our worldview is losing. Now there are other reasons, but this is one major factor: is that our money, the money from all these conservatives, people who believe in the biblical worldview, are without our permission, without our clearance, without our knowledge, is funding these other things. I mean, we have an enemy from within. Now it's crystal clear. I'm like, of course, billions and billions are funding these worldviews.
So think about basically public education, higher education, and high school. And again, we live in a conservative area where we've not had to deal with a lot of this. But especially in your liberal areas, you are paying with tax dollars for a messaging that's happening in your schools, which even right now allows them to take away your kids from your home if you come against this transgender craziness or whatever. Yeah, I mean, it's really scary. And to think that all this is being paid for with your money. So again, you're paying to have your kids groomed, transgendered, whatever, taken out of your home if you resist. And we're just now all of a sudden coming to, it's coming to light. We're seeing it and understanding.
It's being exposed. And so again, I'm just wondering, what does America look like if we have just an even playing field? Just even. The government's not funding that side. They're not funding our worldview. But let's just use our own ideas. Let's let private money settle all this.
Yep.
Even George Soros being funded by USA or whatever it is.
Yep.
I mean, it blows my mind how much we're funding. Let's give us an even playing field. Let's have the
what if we just protected
distracted.
our nation, which is what our federal government is supposed to do, and what if we just fix potholes on the local level, and stop using all this money to push these crazy ideologies? Like you said, what could happen in America if we had a level playing field? That's something to think about. It says here, Trump's message couldn't be clearer. Elitist institutions can't get rich off of public funds while undermining the very nation that's footing the bill. To make your point, when academia becomes a one-party echo chamber, dressed up as intellectual rigor, it stops being education and it starts becoming propaganda. And he says here, this isn't about silencing opinion. It's about ending the public's forced sponsorship of ideological agendas that run counter to American values. When you're taxing, that money just starts going to these places. That is a forced sponsorship. You didn't really have any input in that.
Right. That's completely different from censorship, which says you can't say it. We're simply saying we're not funding with taxpayers' money. That's completely different.
You can come out with that message in NPR or PBS, but you're going to pay for it. We're not going to pay for it. Yep. Let's see how good that goes.
Yep.
Let's see how good your transgender story hour, drag queen story hour goes.
Because if you're funded by the taxpayer money, then you don't have to care about value driven. You don't have to care about whether people care about whether your message is resonating with people or not. You just keep pumping it out because someone else is paying the bills.
Yep.
Now you actually have to look at, are you solving a problem? Are you actually addressing real issues? Are you helping people get better? Because if you're not, no one's going to tune in.
And do people actually like what you're saying, and is it helpful, right?
Yeah,
and if it's not, you're going to go out of business.
Yep.
So I like this. Trump's plan, it says, slash their funding and restore fairness. If media outlets want to advocate a worldview, fine, but don't ask Americans to foot the bill for messaging that they don't agree with. That again, I think one phrase has come out over Trump's administration is a return to common sense. That's common sense. That's not an uneven playing field. It doesn't give one side an advantage. It just creates an even playing field. If you want to pump that message out, you pay the bill for that message, which I think Americans are on both sides of the aisle are resonating with that. So I think that's amazing. The other thing that I wanted to talk about today that's a little bit controversial, although Trump's just providing some bold leadership here. This was the renaming of Veterans Day. And I did a little history here. In 1954, it was Dwight D. Eisenhower that changed the name from Armistice Day, which represented the end of World War I, to Veterans Day because he wanted to broaden the scope and he wanted to honor specifically everybody that was all of our veterans that took part in America's freedom. It says America's contributions to both world wars were decisive turning points in global history. We lost 116,000 Americans in World War I. In World War II, we saw an even greater sacrifice. 407,000 U.S. troops were killed. And it says here, these weren't merely contributions to Allied efforts. They were interventions that altered the course of American history. And so what President Trump wants to do is he says, why in the world are we not celebrating American greatness? Why are we not celebrating American patriotism? These should be moments of, great pride. And so on Truth Social, this is what he posted. Many of our allies and friends are celebrating May 8th as Victory Day, but we did more than any other country by far in producing a victorious result on World War II. I'm hereby renaming May the 8th as Victory Day for World War II and November 11th as Victory Day for World War I. He went on to say we won both wars. Nobody was close to us in terms of strength, bravery, or military brilliance, but we never celebrate anything. He says Trump announcement continues his pattern of restoring American pride, again, to America. So let's talk about this a little bit, because Trump goes on to say that in other countries, China, Russia, they have days where they actually have a military parade, and they show military strength and might, and it's a day of patriotism for the country. He's basically advocating that we should be doing the same thing in America. What do you think about that?
Well, there's two presenting questions I want to ask you. First of all, how biblical is it to have national pride? Because I know for many people, Christian nationalism is this curse word, right? The second question is, how beneficial is it to the nation to have national pride? So I'm going to throw it back at you.
Oh, throwing it back at me.
Yes.
Well, that wasn't fair. All right, I guess I was fair in love and war here. Sometimes people get weird with just the using the word pride. Like I made a comment one time. I said, I'm so proud of my son. Mm-hmm. Pastor Ron, you shouldn't have pride. I think you have to determine what's the issue of your heart. Yeah. The Bible is clear that we should work towards the good of the nation where we find ourselves. We should work towards its benefit. You should love your nation, right, and seek its blessings. So when we talk about nations and nationalism and all that, I think there's a strong biblical case for wherever you live, you should be working for the good of your community and the good of your country. We happen to live in a great country with many, many biblical values. So all the more we should be loving our nation, not in a prideful way, we're better than you or something like that, but just that we care about America and we understand our role in the world, and we understand our role in the freedom of other people and so forth and so on. The greatness of this country has been the greatness of the ideas that this country, was built upon. Sure. So I'm all for it, and you kind of know my position on that whole Christian nationalism thing. I'm a Christian, and yes, I believe in nations, and I believe in our nation, and I'm patriotic in that way. So that was the first question. What was the second question?
Well, how important is national pride to the health of a nation, to itself?
Yeah. So, and again, we talked about cultural identity and remembering your history, right? Yeah. And if you hate your nation, if you're embarrassed about your nation, which is what the Biden administration worked really hard to create, was a self-loathing, we're terrible. They focused on some of the dark moments in American history, things that we had to work on getting right. But to cultivate a loathing for your country doesn't lead to blessing at all. It leads to the destruction of your nation. So I think we've got to get back to a united sense of who we are together, not red and yellow, black and white, but as Americans, not with adjectives in front of our American, but just Americans, and celebrate the greatness of this nation and the contributions of people throughout history to make America the great nation that she is. So when Trump takes leadership like this, it's so unusual because we haven't had a strong leader in the White House. And sometimes it's like shocking. Like, what, he's going to create a holiday? Well, Dwight Eisenhower created a holiday. Other strong presidents have created things, and they provided leadership. I think it's a step in the right direction. He's also trying to pull out all the revisionist history from our museums and and places like that, and say stop all this attacking of our leaders and our presidents and great leaders in the past, and stop all the poisoning of the minds of our young people to hate this nation or to be embarrassed about the nation. So I like this. Now let me ask you this question. Should we be excited about parading? You know, because I can't remember. I won't take the time because I know we're running out of time. But somewhere in this article was mentioning that he wants to establish a day. Here it is: military parade. Plans for a military parade through Washington, D.C. on June the 14th that coincides with the 250th anniversary of the Army's founding. So that's the whole deal with a show of our military strength paraded through our nation's capital. What do you think?
Well, I think it's a subset of national pride. And I think to the extreme, I guess you can be arrogant. You can be saying, hey, Americans are the best people in the world. Everyone else is inferior to us. That's to the extreme. But I think we've been pushed to the extreme in the other direction in the last decade or so, in which, to the point in which we hate our own nation. We're destructive. And what that has caused is it doesn't cause true humility. What it does is cause blame shifting. It causes victimization. It causes that one community is looking at another community and says, all your fault. What I don't see is different people take ownership and say, I want to be better. You know, true humility is stop looking outwards and stop being a victim and say, hey, how can I grow? I don't see that in America. I see this division cause people to blame each other, whether it's your race or your economic status. What we need is, to me, we need to shift back to pride and unity. And I think that's what Trump sees. He sees his political instinct is that this is carrying us too far. We're too divided. The melting pot ain't melting anymore. So he's trying to bring us back together. And if having a military procession like other nations do reunites our strength, celebrates who we are, gives a sense of American pride, then I'm down for that.
Yeah. I think and I'm with you. I say a big amen. Sometimes things swing, like you said, as a pendulum. We've been so negative about America, and now to go back and have Trump say, hey, you know, let's call this the Gulf of America. You know, those types of things makes people like shrink back. I think this could be a good thing if we're not declaring that our hope and our confidence is in our military might. You know, if you can mix a display of the strength that you have and the strength that you have because of you know, one nation under God and honoring the Lord and putting forth biblical principles and having economic excess because of our system of economics here in this country, which we could make a strong case for biblical capitalism. If you can do all that while giving glory to God, I think it sends a message to your enemies that there is actually strength and peace through strength, right? And that we honor the Lord and we give Him the glory for who we are as a nation and for the strength and the pride that we have as people, one nation under God. I think that is good. If it's just we're going to show off our muscles, I think we're going the other extreme and we're putting pride in ourselves and pride in our own strength, and that never works out good, right? But I love this. I love this return. We're not ashamed of America. We're proud of America, and we're looking to recover our history.
Let me just say this: the other superpowers in the world right now, China, Russia, those probably two other China, United States, China, and Russia. I would say, from my estimation, both China and Russia have heavily invested in national pride, and that's one of the reasons why they. It's just practicality. They hate themselves. The nation is not going to exist for very long. It's not going to be very healthy. It's not going to be very strong.
Let's talk about this. We saw a resurgence, right, of recruiting in the armed forces to where it's at an all-time high. Why do we go from all-time low, begging people, to all-time high? The answer is as clear as the nose on your face. Why in the world do you want to fight for a nation that you hate, or that you're embarrassed about, or that is viewed as an aggressor, or whatever? You're not going to go give your life or risk your life, right, to fight for that kind of a country. So how important is national pride? Well, if you want to survive as a nation, it's very, very important.
Well, so you're talking about defense of the nation, right, as military. Like, just think about, like, from the recruiting or hiring standpoint. Do I want everyone come knocking down my door so I can pick and choose the most qualified candidate? Or do I have to go and find no one wants the job. I got to go find a bunch of unqualified candidates and offer them all kind of incentives to join in. Like, this is night and day. And this is a supplying to our military force, which is the defense of our nation. So that itself is worthy of investing in national pride.
And I'll say this, it also is an investment in the fact that it's an acknowledgement of the fact that men, alpha males, want to fight for a team that's strong and believes in what you stand for and is willing to risk and make. This is not toxic masculinity. This is godly masculinity. This is what godly men want to do, right? And true men want to do is go fight for what matters and defend your family and defend your way of life and all of these things. And so we're seeing that now. We're not trying to run out and recruit, everybody from every demographic because we have some DEI quota. We don't have to do that when we just simply say we want to have the most lethal fighting force in the world, and we want to defend the nation that we love. Yep. That's a whole different set of messaging, right? Yep, absolutely. So anyway, it's going to be interesting to see how all this pans out. But bottom line is Trump is very popular with our military right now, as he should be, because he's actually supporting them and cheering them on and encouraging them in their vital role in which they play. This is a good transition here. You talked about how important is national pride. It kind of gets back to the whole issue of historical truth and why it matters, because what a nation believes about itself determines its a cultural identity. And a nation that's confused and has no identity probably doesn't know where it came from and doesn't know what it should be celebrating. Great quote by Carl Sandburg. It says, when a nation goes down, one condition may always be found: they forgot where they came from. I think there's a lot of national amnesia or a lot of confusion about who we are as Americans, because the people we used to celebrate, George Washington and the like, we're not celebrating any longer. We've tried to throw stones at them or turn them into, racist haters or whatever. But a lot of our heroes, we just aren't celebrating anymore. Another quote from Will and Ariel Durant, historians. They said, civilization is not inherited. It has to be learned and earned by each generation anew. If the transmission should be interrupted, civilization would die and we would be savages again. So we've seen some of that savage-like behavior emerge when you forget your moral and spiritual foundation as a nation. You forget the principles upon which, this nation was built. And so, Trump again is restoring American pride. He's also going after a lot of our museums across the world. And I was trying to find, I won't take a lot of time, but trying to find the quote, because it deals with the fact that worldview is behind all of these things, all right, when it comes to revision. Where'd that other article go? Here we go. This was a couple of things that Trump did, executive orders targeting revisionist history and divisive ideologies in our national parks and Smithsonian museums. And he was talking about, for instance, the Smithsonian called hard work being labeled as an aspect of white culture. So somehow hard work is whiteness, white culture. And he lists here a bunch of things that are going on. But the bottom line is these are worldview issues. Here's what I was looking for. At the heart of this conflict is a fundamental divide regarding the purpose of museums and historic sites. Traditionally, these institutions have aimed at promoting civic education and preserving American heritage. A growing trend, however, is to use them to further social justice, engage in activism, and tell a more, quote, inclusive and equitable version of history. So one side is simply trying to highlight American heritage. The other side is trying to be more, what's the word, progressive, I guess, trying to rewrite American history or rewrite it in a different light. So at the battle behind all of this is two competing worldviews. I wanted to highlight this because we have a very special person who's coming to our church, and that's Bill Federer. And wanted to highlight some of his books. He's going to be here May the 25th. I'm so excited to have him at Living Stones. He'll be at both of our services that Sunday morning, and he will also be speaking that Sunday night. One of the topics he's going to be addressing is a topic of a new book that he came out with. It's called Who is the King in America? And who are the counselors to the king? This is an overview of 6,000 years of history and why America is unique. That's one of, again, the topics of his presentation when he comes. There's also another wonderful book here called Miracles in American History, in which he highlights amazing stories to answered prayer. I guess this was written by his wife Susie. An amazing book. And again, when you take all of the richness of our Christian heritage, and in particular God, out of American history, you get a very secular perspective on history. And maybe we'll get into that the next time we're together. Here's a couple other books I want to highlight. This is a 2-part series, Change to Chains, Rise of the Republic, and here's a second one called Rise of the Tyrant, 6,000-Year Quest for Global Power. I got this book here in my own library, Silence Equals Consent, The Sin of Omission. And these are just a handful of the books that we pulled out of our closet that are ready for sale when he comes. He's written extensively on a lot of things regarding America's history. But I just want to make a big plug. You guys, make sure you're there that Sunday and that Sunday night. I want to make a big plug, too, to homeschool groups and to Christian groups and all groups, all kids, public school, private school, Christian school, homeschool. You're going to really, really enjoy Bill Fetter, and he has a ton of resources to help equip you to have an understanding, of America's true heritage and history. So it's going to be a really, really great weekend. We want you all to come. Any final comments on this?
Yeah, knowing our history prepares us for the future. When you cut ourselves off from our history, then there's such a sense of arrogance and pride that we know better, or we can do it better this time.
Yep.
Whereas there's years and years of wisdom in the past that we refuse to look at. So I think we're listening to our historians, our faithful historians. Really, it's a humbling act for us to say, okay, let's really see what happens. Even in Scripture, over and over again, the Lord compels His people to say, "Hey, look back on what. Remember, remember, remember." That's one of the most frequent words to the Israelites. Remember, right?
Yes, that's a great point. In fact, in the book of Acts, Samuel gives a nice remembrance story. Just a couple things here. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 32. Remember the former things of old, for I am God. Isaiah 46:9, call to remembrance the former days. Hebrews 10:32. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 1, all these things happen unto them for an example. They are written for our admonition. I mean, the Bible reminds us, don't forget where you came from. Don't forget what God has done in your lives. Don't forget His goodness, because to forget is to reproduce the same mistakes over and over again. So maybe we'll do that in next week's podcast, because I got an amazing article here by David Barton that highlights a lot of the revisionist situations in American history and all the good stuff that's been cut out and what we need to do about it. But anyway, thanks so much for celebrating 250 episodes, with us. There's not a week that goes by where I don't talk to somebody who says, "Hey, listen to the podcast," and that really encourages me and Pastor Andrew when you let us know that you appreciate that. Again, thank you for being with me from the beginning.
Yeah, congratulations.
This has been amazing.
250
Couldn't have done it without you.
Thank you for
Matthew, again, thank you for all your hard work. The best is yet to come. That's what I'm believing. The best is yet to come. Yep. So again, thank you. Until we'll see you next Thursday, episode 251, which doesn't sound nearly as exciting, but we're working towards that next milestone. Thanks for being a part of the process with us.